At 11:52, on the night the power grid nearly gave out, my downstairs neighbor texted me a single line, "Are you awake or just suffering in silence like the rest of us?" By 12:15, I was standing in her doorway in a t-shirt I'd slept in for 2 nights straight, and by 1, we were parked on a gravel shoulder next to a reservoir. Neither of us was legally supposed to enter after dark. That's where I found out she hadn't packed a swimsuit either. She hadn't planned to need one. My name is Nathan Cole. I was 27 that summer, working nights as a paramedic in a city that was setting heat records every 3 days like it was trying to win something. I'd get home around 11, peel off a uniform that smelled like hand sanitizer and adrenaline, and lie on the floor of my apartment because the floor was the only surface that hadn't absorbed the heat of the day. The building had one window unit per floor, installed sometime during a previous administration, and it worked in the same spirit that a screen door works against a hurricane. My neighbor's name was Reina Ibarra. She lived one floor down, in the unit whose ceiling I could hear her pacing through some nights when she couldn't sleep. She was 26, finishing a graduate degree in urban planning, and possessed the specific, dangerous talent of making a person feel like the most interesting thing in a room simply by asking one good question and then actually waiting for the answer. We'd met in the laundry room 8 months earlier, arguing over whose turn it was for the good dryer, and had been trading small kindnesses ever since. She watered my plants when I picked up overtime shifts. I fixed her sink when the landlord ignored her calls for 3 weeks. We had, without ever naming it, become the kind of neighbors who left their doors unlocked for each other. She'd had a boyfriend when we met. His name was Marcus, and he had opinions about ambulances that he shared with me twice, unprompted, at a building barbecue, as though my job were something I'd chosen specifically to annoy him. He and Reina broke up in the spring, quietly, the way things end when two people have simply stopped reaching for each other. After that, our conversations on the shared stairwell got longer. She started saving me a portion of whatever she'd cooked that didn't fit in her fridge. I started finding reasons to be on the stairs at the same time she was. I had my own reasons for being careful. 2 years before that summer, I'd left a relationship that had quietly calcified into something neither of us wanted to admit was over. I told myself afterward that I'd learned my lesson about convenience, about loving someone mainly because they were nearby and available, and it was easier than being alone. Reina lived 19 steps below my front door. Starting something with her felt like signing up for the exact mistake I'd promised myself I wouldn't make twice. So when my phone lit up that night with her text, I almost didn't answer. "Almost, I'm awake," I wrote back. Awake and considering criminal activity to escape this heat. Her reply came fast. "Good. Put on shoes. I'm coming up." She knocked 4 minutes later wearing a loose gray dress and sandals, her dark hair pulled up off her neck, a canvas bag slung across her body. There was a version of her expression I hadn't seen before, not her usual patient, listening face, but something brighter and more reckless, like she'd already made a decision and was waiting to see how long it would take me to catch up. "Where exactly are we committing this crime?" I asked. "Cedar Hollow Reservoir. 25 minutes if the lights cooperate. That closes at sundown. Most of it does." She smiled in a way that told me arguing would be a waste of both our time. "There's a service road on the east side. My cousin used to take me there when I was in high school." I should have said I had a 12-hour shift starting at 7 the next evening. I should have said a dozen sensible things. Instead, I grabbed my keys off the hook by the door because some part of me had been waiting 4 months for her to ask me for something after dark. Her car had cloth seats that had absorbed the smell of the day's heat and a dashboard light that had been blinking about an oil change for at least a month. She rolled the windows down because, she admitted, her AC had died the week before and she hadn't found time to deal with it. "You live one floor above a guy who fixes things for fun," I said, "and you didn't tell me your car was struggling?" "I told you. Last Tuesday on the stairs. You said my car's being dramatic. That's not the same as an official request for help. I didn't want to be one more thing on your list. You already fix my sink and carry my groceries and listen to me complain about my thesis advisor." None of that felt like a chore. She glanced at me sideways, something unreadable passing behind her eyes, and didn't say anything for a mile. Then she turned the radio up, an old station playing songs neither of us would admit to knowing all the words to, and the moment dissolved into something looser and easier. Warm wind cut through the car. She sang the wrong lyrics on purpose just to make me correct her. Every time I did, she looked entirely too pleased with herself. Cedar Hollow at night wasn't the manicured day-use area with the boat ramp and the picnic tables. It was a darker, wilder stretch further along the shoreline, ringed by scrub pine, the water catching moonlight in long silver seams. Raina parked on the shoulder of the service road and cut the engine, and for a second, the quiet after the radio felt enormous. "You've done this before," I said, watching her navigate the tree line with a small flashlight like she had the path memorized. "Every summer until I left for college, my cousin used to sneak me out here to get away from a house with no air conditioning and 4 younger siblings." She glanced back at me. "We're not trespassing, technically. We're honoring tradition. That's an impressively flexible definition of technically." The trail opened onto a narrow wooden dock, half of it soft with age, the water beneath it, so still it looked like something solid you could walk across. The heat that had been sitting on the city for 6 days suddenly felt very far away. Raina set her bag down at the end of the dock and started working her sandals off with her toes. I pulled my shirt over my head without thinking much of it. The water was right there, the night was suffocating, it seemed obvious. When I looked up, she was watching me, not glancing away the way you do when you're caught. "Watching. You've been holding out on the neighbors," she said. "All those stairwell conversations, and you never once mentioned you look like that. You've seen me carry a broken washing machine up 2 flights, different context entirely." I laughed and reached for the hem of my shorts, and that's when I noticed her bag again, really noticed it, sitting open at the edge of the dock, 2 towels and a bottle of water, and nothing that resembled fabric a person could swim in. "Raina, Nathan, you don't have a swimsuit." "I don't. Did you forget it? Or, I've never once forgotten anything in my life. Ask anyone." She turned to face the water, and when she looked back over her shoulder at me, whatever nerve I'd been building dissolved into something closer to disbelief. "I told you I was awake and considering criminal activity. I didn't say all of it was going to be trespassing." For a second, neither of us moved. The frogs kept doing whatever frogs do at 1 in the morning. Somewhere behind us, a screen door on one of the empty cabins along the shore banged once in the wind and went still. "You drove me 25 minutes into the woods," I said carefully, "knowing exactly what you were planning. I drove you to a reservoir in a heat wave. What you assume I was planning says more about you." But there was nothing convincing in her voice. The teasing had a current underneath it now, something more honest and more frightened than she wanted to let show. "I got tired of guessing, Nathan. I got tired of standing in a stairwell wondering if I was imagining 4 months of you finding reasons to talk to me. 4 months. She'd been counting too. "You could have just asked me to dinner," I said. "Would you have said yes?" I thought about all the reasons I'd built for myself. The promise I'd made after my last relationship, the tidy rule that neighbors made bad bets, the safety of never naming what I felt so I'd never have to be wrong about it. Eventually, I admitted. Probably. Yes. I didn't want eventually. She stepped closer, close enough that the space between us became the only thing in the clearing that mattered. I wanted tonight. I don't remember deciding to kiss her. I remember the heat of the day still radiating up off the old boards of the dock, and her hand finding the front of my shirt before I'd even set it down, and the particular quiet of a kiss that had been 4 months in the making landing exactly where it needed to. When we broke apart, she was smiling in a way I hadn't seen from her before, not careful, not measured, just happy. "For the record," she said, "I still intend to get in that water. I had a feeling. You can turn around if you want to be a gentleman about it." "Do you want me to be a gentleman about it?" Her answer was to laugh, low and unbothered, and to turn her own back to me instead, working the zipper at the side of her dress. I heard fabric fall onto the boards, and then the soft slap of her feet against wood, and then a splash that sent a spray of cool water across my shins. She surfaced a few feet from the dock, dark hair slicked back, moonlight catching the water sliding off her shoulders. "Your turn, paramedic." I left my shorts folded, badly, next to her dress, and dove in before I could think too hard about the fact that my ordinary, careful life had just taken a sharp and permanent left turn. The reservoir was colder than the lake had any right to be in a heat wave, and I came up gasping loud enough that Raina laughed so hard she had to grab the dock ladder to keep from going under. "You said this would be refreshing," I said. "I said it would fix the heat." I didn't promise dignity. We swam in slow circles near the dock, keeping a careful, deliberate distance that neither of us fully committed to. She dared me to race her to the far marker buoy and beat me by half a body length, which she claimed proudly and which I disputed loudly. At some point, the distance between us stopped being deliberate at all. I found her hand under the water first, or she found mine. Afterward, neither of us could agree on the order of things. And we drifted there together while the frogs kept up their argument in the reeds and the moon sat low and orange over the tree line. "Tell me this isn't a bad idea," she said, quieter now, her forehead nearly resting against mine. "It's an incredibly bad idea," I said. "I'm glad we did it anyway." Relief moved across her face so plainly I felt it land in my own chest. "I have something to tell you," she said, "and I don't want you to hear it and immediately turn responsible on me." That's an ominous way to start a sentence. I got an email this morning. There's a fellowship, 6 months, urban housing policy, working directly under one of the researchers I've been trying to get in front of for 2 years. She swallowed. "It's in Portland." The water suddenly felt colder than it had a minute ago. "When would you leave?" 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Not enough time to figure out what we were before I'd have to figure out how to miss her. "Is that why tonight happened?" I asked, and hated the flatness in my own voice as soon as it left me. "No." She said it fast, like she'd been braced for the question. "Tonight happened because I couldn't stand one more night of pretending I didn't want this. The fellowship happened because I applied for it 8 months ago, before any of this started, and I found out today, and I panicked, and the first thing I wanted to do, the very first thing, was tell you. Not my sister, not my advisor. You." I pulled her closer under the water, mostly so I wouldn't have to look directly at what was written across her face. "You should take it," I said. She went still against me. That was fast. "It's your career, Raina. 6 months isn't a lifetime. You sound like you're reading off a card. I'm trying to be supportive. You're trying to hand me the easy answer so you don't have to sit in the hard one." She pulled back enough to look at me directly, water beading on her lashes. "I didn't bring you out here so you could talk me into something you don't actually want. I brought you out here because I wanted one honest night before I had to make an impossible decision." The truth, when it finally came, was uglier than the polite version I'd offered first. "I don't want you to go," I said. "I also don't want to be the reason you don't." "Those two things can both be true," she said, "and neither of them tells me what you actually want to happen next." I didn't have an answer for her yet, not one that felt earned. We swam back to the dock in a silence that wasn't unkind, just heavy, and dried off with towels that had gone lukewarm in the bag, and drove home with the windows down and the radio off, both of us quietly turning the night over in our heads. She dropped me at the building a little before 3. "Thanks for the crime," she said, trying for lightness and almost landing it. "Raina, you don't have to say anything else tonight. I already made you swim naked in a reservoir on a work night. That's plenty for one evening. Dinner tomorrow," I said. "A real one, not a stairwell conversation. Not a midnight ambush at a reservoir. An actual date where I get to think for longer than 4 seconds before I tell you what I want." Something in her shoulders loosened. "Okay," she said. "Dinner." I worked a 12-hour shift the next day running on 90 minutes of sleep and the kind of stubborn adrenaline that comes from knowing exactly what you want to say to someone and not having said it yet. I showered the hospital smell off, put on the one shirt I owned that wasn't scrubs or a t-shirt with a coffee stain, and knocked on her door, holding a small, ugly, extremely resilient cactus. Because flowers felt like they were trying too hard, and showing up empty-handed felt worse. She opened the door in a green sundress, hair down for once, and looked at the plant with open suspicion. "Is this an apology? It's drought-resistant. Practical for the season. Nathan, it's an apology," I admitted, "for handing you the easy answer in the water instead of the honest one." She let me in. The cactus went on her kitchen windowsill, next to a stack of thesis drafts and a coffee mug that said "Ask me about zoning law," which felt correct on every level. "I owe you the real answer," I said, before I could talk myself into another safe deflection. "I want you to take the fellowship if it's what you want. I also want to find out what this is between us, and I don't know how both of those things happen at the same time, and that scared me enough last night that I gave you a version of myself that wasn't telling the truth. And the truth? The truth is, I've been finding excuses to run into you on the stairs for 4 months. The truth is, I spent the entire drive home replaying every second of tonight instead of sleeping. The truth is, I don't want 6 months of missing you to be the price of you getting the career you've worked for, but I also refuse to be the reason you don't try." Her eyes had gone bright by the time I finished. That's a lot of truth for someone standing next to a cactus. I panic under pressure. It's the job. She crossed the kitchen and kissed me, unhurried, nothing like the charged, breathless thing at the dock the night before. Steadier, chosen. "I haven't accepted yet," she said against my mouth. "I have until Friday, then we have until Friday to figure out what long distance looks like for us, instead of you deciding alone at 2 in the morning. Careful. That's dangerously close to a plan. I contain multitudes." We spent that week the way you spend a week when a countdown is sitting on the table between every conversation. Dinner turned into a walk, turned into her showing me the neighborhood she'd fallen in love with. When she first moved to the city, the community garden she'd helped rezone as part of a class project, the crosswalk she'd successfully lobbied the city council to add after a near miss involving her little brother. I understood, watching her talk about it, why the fellowship mattered so much. It wasn't ambition for its own sake. It was the exact shape of the life she was trying to build, and Portland was the fastest way there. Tuesday night, she cooked dinner in her apartment instead of us going out because, she said, she wanted one memory of us that didn't involve a hostess seating us at a table for 2 like strangers on a first date. I sat on her counter while she chopped vegetables badly and refused help, narrating her entire thesis defense strategy as though I were the committee. Somewhere between the garlic and the second glass of wine, she stopped mid-sentence and looked at me for a long moment. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. I'm just trying to memorize this, in case Portland is terrible and I need something to hold on to." Portland isn't going to be terrible. You're going to walk in there and make them regret not offering you the position permanently on day 1. You don't know that. I know you. That's close enough. She threw a piece of carrot at me, missed badly, and declared the moment ruined by my confidence. I caught the next piece out of the air and ate it, which she found so irrationally satisfying that she made me do it twice more before dinner was ready. It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic confession or anything that would have made for a good story on its own. It was just an ordinary Tuesday, the kind we were trying to collect as many of as possible before the distance made them harder to come by, and it turned out to be one of my favorite nights of that whole summer. On Thursday night, we sat on the building's fire escape with the last of the heat wave finally breaking around us, the first real rain in 11 days coming down warm and heavy on the street below. "I'm going to take it," she said. "I know. You're not going to try to talk me out of it." "I already tried that once, badly, in a reservoir. I learned my lesson." She laughed, and some of the tension went out of her posture. "I don't want this to be the thing that ends before it starts. Then it won't be." I took her hand. 6 months. Phone calls when we say we'll call, flights when we can afford them. You come back sometimes, I fly out sometimes, and we find out if this is real without either of us, pretending the distance doesn't exist. You make it sound simple. It won't be simple. It'll be worth it. Those aren't the same thing. She left 3 weeks later with 2 suitcases and a box of books she refused to ship because she didn't trust movers with her marked up copies. I drove her to the airport at 5 in the morning, and we stood at security doing the thing where neither person wants to be the one to say goodbye first. "Call me when you land," I said, "obviously, and when the fellowship gets hard, and when it doesn't. You're going to regret giving me that much access to your phone. Try me." The 6 months that followed were not romantic in any of the ways the reservoir night had been. They were missed calls because of time zones and video chats where her connection dropped at the worst moments, and one bad week in November where she called me crying, after a committee meeting went sideways and I sat on my fire escape until 3 in the morning just so I could stay on the line while she talked it out. But, but there were good parts too. She flew back for a long weekend in October and met me at arrivals wearing the same green dress from our first real date, and I understood immediately and completely what that did to my concentration for the rest of the weekend. I mailed her a second cactus after she swore the first one had died from what she called emotional neglect, and she sent back a photo of it thriving on a Portland windowsill with a caption that just said, "See, I'm capable of keeping things alive." At month 4, I started looking at transfer options for paramedics in the Pacific Northwest, mostly out of curiosity, mostly telling myself I was just checking. At month 5, I flew out for her final presentation and sat in the back of a university auditorium watching her explain a housing proposal to a room of people twice her age who kept nodding like she was the only person in the building who actually understood the problem. At month 6, the fellowship offered her a permanent research position if she wanted it. She called me before she called anyone else. "Do you still want me out here?" she asked, and I could hear in her voice that some small, stubborn part of her still expected me to hesitate. "More than I wanted to get in that water," I said. She laughed, wet and startled, on the other end of the line. "That's the least romantic thing you've ever said to me." "It's the truest." I put in my transfer paperwork the following week. It took another 2 months to actually move, during which time she flew back twice, and I flew out once, and we spent an entire weekend arguing cheerfully about whether her 6 decorative pillows were structurally necessary for a 1-bedroom apartment. They were not. They came anyway. I didn't move in with her right away. I took a place 4 blocks over, mostly because we'd both agreed, somewhere in month 5 of long distance, that we wanted to choose each step deliberately instead of collapsing every decision into one enormous leap out of relief. She pretended to be offended by the 4 blocks for about a week, then admitted, quietly, one night on my new balcony, that she liked it, liked that neither of us was rushing to prove the distance had been worth it. We were just living, together and separate at once, figuring it out one ordinary Tuesday at a time. A year after that first reservoir night, we drove back to the city for a visit. And on our last evening there, Raina insisted we detour out to Cedar Hollow. The same service road, the same half-soft dock, the same low moon sitting over the tree line like it had been waiting for us the whole time. "Did you bring a swimsuit this time?" I asked, watching her dig through the bag she'd packed. She held it up without a word. 2 swimsuits, folded neatly, a small victory of planning ahead. "Look at you," I said. "Responsible. I contain multitudes." She tossed one to me and started working her sandals off, and for a second the whole year collapsed down into that one image. Her at the edge of a dock, daring me to catch up to a decision she'd already made. We didn't need the countdown this time. No fellowship deadline sitting on the table, no unanswered question about what 6 months apart would do to us. Just 2 towels, 2 swimsuits we actually used, and a decision that had already been made a dozen ordinary Tuesdays ago, long before either of us said it out loud. She held out her hand at the edge of the dock, the same way she had that first night. "Getting in with me?" she asked. I didn't hesitate this time either. I never had, not really. I just needed a little longer to admit it. If you've ever had a night like that, the kind that quietly rearranges your entire life before you've had time to brace for it, tell me about it. And if you want more stories like this one, longer versions, extra chapters, the parts that don't make it into the shorter cut, that's exactly what the membership is for. New story every week, first look at everything, no ads slowing it down. See you in the next one.